If you would have asked me 5 years ago what the on-trend brewing thing would be in 2021, I would have guessed something with the letters I, P, and A. And I would have been wrong. Laugh all you want, but hard seltzer is here to stay. And Imperial Yeast's new seasonal strain W04 Paramount can help brewers get the most out of their water fermentations. A clean and aggressive fermenter, Paramount will produce an excellent seltzer with low fusel alcohols, plus it's gluten-free. If you tried making seltzer with standard ale or lager strains, you know the struggle, and Imperial Yeast is here to help with W04 Paramount. Learn more about this novel strain at imperialyeast.com and pick up your W04 Paramount before it's too late. A goal of many modern brewers, particularly those with a penchant for IPA, is to extract as much character from hops as possible, which has led to the development of a multitude of methods for doing just that. Recent research indicating a likely point of diminishing returns when it comes to hopping rates has forced brewers to reconsider the idea that, quote, more is more, and seek unique ways to maximize hop character without increasing hop usage. You're listening to the Brewlosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and joining me on this episode to discuss the use of a unique ingredient said to increase hop aroma in beer is contributor Andy Carter.
You know, Marshall, I love spending all my money on hops, all the hot named hops, Citra, Mosaic, whatever, what have you. But I also like exploring new chemical ways. It might be considered cheating by some to use small amounts of new chemistries, enzymes, and what have you. But I'm curious on this specific experiment, because it's a new chemical, or a relatively new one, and it purports to have a huge impact on hop aroma, and I'm all for it. So let's talk about it. Yeah,
to me, the sign of a world-class IPA is when you can smell the hops as you're pouring it off the tap, or just as you start bringing the glass to your lips for a sip. When it's still a foot or so away from your face, and you're just getting this bouquet of hop character. I absolutely love that. While I have plenty of beers, I've actually made plenty of beers without the use of additives. Obviously, I think most brewers are doing that these days. I absolutely understand why brewers would be interested in a product that makes achieving that characteristic easier, and that's what Rapidase Revelation Aroma promises to do. This is going to be a really interesting episode. All right, if you like what we're up to and you want us to keep doing it, consider becoming a patron of Brewlosophy. By committing to a small monthly pledge over at patreon.com/Brewlosophy, you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invitation to a monthly live Q&A session with somebody in the brewing world. For this month, July of 2022, our friend Jeff Daly, Associate Sensory Scientist at Haas, will be returning to answer patron questions, only this time he'll actually scroll through the comments and answer those questions. Those who were a part of this last session know what I'm talking about. Jeff is a great guy whose job at Haas involves testing the sensory side of hops. So if you love hops as much as we do, this session is for you. To be a part of it, you have to make your pledge at patreon.com/Brewlosophy by Friday, July 29th, 2022, as Jeff's going to be taking those questions on Saturday the 30th. All past sessions with folks like Scott Janish, Sarah Flora, and John Kimmich are stored on our private Facebook page, as well as our Patreon feed these days. So patrons can go back and watch them whenever they like. Again, that's patreon.com/Brewlosophy. And if you wouldn't mind letting us know what you think about this show by rating and reviewing it in Apple Podcast or wherever it is you listen to podcasts, we'd really appreciate it. For just a few seconds of your time, not only do you help make the show more visible to those who may not have heard of it, but you'll provide us with valuable feedback that we use to make the show better. We are really inching close to that 1,000 review mark in Apple Podcasts. So anything you guys can do to help us get there would be really appreciated. Thanks to everybody who has already taken the time to let us know what you think. Feedback this week is brought to you by Clawhammer Supply, who offer brewers various options for high quality, reasonably priced electric brewing rigs in various voltages and sizes. I've used their 120 volt system for 5-gallon batches, and Paul and I here in Fresno just jumped up to their 240 volt 10-gallon setup. I'm telling you, this thing is amazing. Clawhammer Supply really puts the effort into ensuring their systems do exactly as they're intended to do in as efficient a way as possible. If you're not ready to make the jump to electric, they also sell 10 and 20-gallon brew-in-a-bag home brewing starter kits. If you've been considering going electric, do yourself a favor and visit clawhammersupply.com. We're confident you'll love them just as much as we do. All right, Adrian Grossoris from San Antonio, Texas, wrote in after listening to last week's listener-submitted beer review episode, which people really seemed to enjoy. That was the one. That wasn't last week. That was a couple weeks ago. But this is the one where my wife, Laura, and Tim's wife, Michelle, joined us. And boy, did we get a lot of good feedback on that one. Adrian said, I was very disappointed to realize that the beer you received in a moldy package and almost completely emptied out was mine, Red Eyes. I'm not sure how it happened, as I also shipped the same exact beer in identical packaging from San Antonio to friends in Houston and New York City without problems. I prefer the plastic bottles and resealable caps for multiple reasons, but I'll have to reconsider using them next time I ship. Still, like you, I'm very surprised that UPS reboxed it, and even more surprised they didn't drink the full bottle. I am glad, however, that one bottle survived and that you seem to enjoy it. I'm not surprised the two wives were not big fans. My wife doesn't like it either. I, on the other hand, loved it.
It's really interesting that that actually the packaging company did all that work. I think it's probably because if it was plastic bottles, those are soda bottles, and not many homebrewers I know at least actually use the plastic PET type of reclosable bottles. So that's interesting. But it's that's kind of the game you play with shipping. I won't claim to be a master a beer trader or anything like that for commercial beers, but I've shipped beers to people and all across the country, and you just have to be really careful with packaging. It's just the important thing, and yep, you're going to lose bottles. But that is how it goes. I wonder, did you notice, Marshall, if the bottle was there's openings, or was it like the seals were screwed up? How did that appear? That's
one of the weirdest things is all of the bottles were sealed, I have a feeling they may have. I don't know if the caps were fully sealed on, but it's not difficult to crank down on those things. So it really makes no sense to me. And the one bottle that did make it, there was 4 bottles, I believe, that Adrian sent. There was one full one, thankfully, and it was delicious. And then there was another one that was about half full. So some leaked out somewhere, and then 2 were just empty. And those empty ones, if you've ever been to, say, a baseball game, like the next day, you go to a baseball stadium the next day and you smell that old beer. That's what it smelled like. It was not soda. There was no way. So UPS did us a solid by not tossing those in the trash. But Adrian, I do want to thank you not only for letting me know those beers were yours so we can give you some credit for sending them to me, but for sending them to me in the first place and taking that risk. I know it's a huge bummer that only one of the 4 made it in good shape, but that one you sent me was excellent, even if our wives weren't the biggest fans of it. It was one of the most beery flavored beers that we reviewed in that session. Second, I really don't think you need to move away from PET bottles. In fact, Andy, you probably agree that they're arguably safer than glass bottles.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure.
Right. And I can't say what happened to the beers you sent me. I have no idea. But considering that the ones you sent to Houston and New York were fine, I'd chalk this one up to a one-off accident.
Yeah.
Again, thank you for hitting me up after listening to that episode, Adrian. And I will say that I think I've convinced the ladies to be a regular part of that series. So we got some more fun times coming. If you have show feedback, you can send it to feedback@brewlosophy.com or drop us a note on social media. Real quick, you may not be aware that we have a YouTube channel. Brewlosophy has a YouTube channel, which is understandable because we haven't really posted many videos since we started this whole shindig back in 2014. Well, we just wanted to let you know that we do have a YouTube channel. And if you like the kind of stuff that we do here on the podcast or over at brewlosophy.com, you may want to go subscribe to the Brewlosophy YouTube channel, which you can find just by searching for Brewlosophy on YouTube. That's all I'm prepared to say at this point. All right, when we're back from this break, our focus will be on the impact Rapidase Revelation Aroma has on beer. Chilling work can be a chore, especially after a long brew day, but not with the Xchillerator Counterflow Chiller, which can chill a 5-gallon or 19-liter batch of wort in 5 minutes or less, leading to a strong cold break and clear wort in the fermenter. Brewlosophy's Matt Del Fiacco uses the Xchillerator Max and absolutely loves it. In addition to improved chilling efficiency, every Xchillerator comes with a 5-year warranty that covers the entire chiller for manufacturer defects. If you're looking to up your chilling game and a CFC is right for you, head over to xchillerator.com today. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. There's no denying that stainless steel is the best material for brewing equipment, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of wort, comes with a domed lid to even further reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today. As much as I enjoy a hoppy IPA, it's never been a style I've obsessed about when it comes to brewing. Hence, I tend to rely on whatever hopping methods others are reporting good success with. I trust the same is true for many other brewers out there, but I only learned about a product called Rapidase Revelation Aroma when reading Scott Janish's excellent book, The New IPA. Though my understanding of what exactly it is and how exactly it works is still admittedly lacking. Andy, perhaps you can educate me a little bit on what this product really is and what it's supposed to do to beer.
Yeah. So in general with hops, there's all these flavor compounds that are locked up in them. That's why we love them so much. We focused and we've talked, a lot about the bittering ways, the alpha and beta acids, but there's all these little essential oils, myrcene and linalool and all these flavor compounds, let's say for the sake of argument. And they're in different parts of the hop. And, as we've seen in the last, say, 10, 15 years of hop growth, we're just been increasing the number of those oils. Those essential oils are just increasing percentages of the hop because that's what people want. So people are looking at the hop compound itself, and it's quite complicated. All these plants, there's so many little things, little bits and pieces that are locked up in them. But there's obviously plant matter, there's cell walls, and there are bound flavor compounds. So, you think of take something that's together, some pieces of it, and if it's by itself, it's one thing, and the pieces are another. My favorite example in chemistry is salt, table salt, sodium chloride. Sodium by itself is incredibly flammable. It can create a fire if it's put in water, and chlorine by itself is incredibly toxic, right? But you put them together, table salt, right?
Yeah.
So totally two things come together, totally different, right? And that's chemical bonds. So what the Rapidase Revelation Aroma is trying to do is an enzyme. We'll talk about what an enzyme is in a second. But, it's trying to release some of these bound flavor compounds that are locked up in hops. And, hey, like I said, I love spending all my money at Yakima Valley hops with all these expensive hops. But, if I can just get a little bit more for a little bit less money, I would love to have that.
Yeah. So my understanding is this is a product that is provided specifically by Scott Lab. And maybe there are other versions of this that other labs, offer to brewers as well. And my understanding is that it's typically, or it was originally intended for use in the wine industry. Is that?
Yeah. So we're not the only people chasing aromas and flavors, right? So in the winemaking industry, you have this process of taking grapes and pressing them and then creating juice out of them. And that juice, or the must, is then, yeast is added, or even yeast is not added, and then it's fermented. But there's a part of that process where the grape skins are left on the juice, and there's a chemical process of releasing these aromas. And their website actually gets into it a little bit. White wines have thiols, and red wines have other terpenes and other flavors that they want. And that kind of chemical process of releasing these bound flavor compounds comes to it. And that what they've been finding, or at least how they sell this stuff, is they say if you add this during that process, you're going to release more and more, and to try to capture more and more of that flavor you'd otherwise be missing. And so it makes sense. These similar chemical compounds are in beer. Well, why not try and see what you can extract from the hops in that way?
Yeah, it's so interesting to me. Oh, I would say that we always in brewing, we're always talking about enzymes. I think for most of us, that talk focuses primarily around, amylase enzyme during the mash, right?
Sure,
Your alpha
exactly.
and beta amylase,
Exactly.
and the conversion of, long chain dextrins into fermentable shorter chain sugars. What we've been hearing, I'd say over the last 5-ish years, maybe, is a lot of talk about the enzymes involved in hop expression, right? And usually on the cold side, whether there's something going on during fermentation or whatever it might be. And another term that we hear tossed around quite a bit these days, kind of alongside the whole enzyme talk, is thiols. And I have to imagine with Rapidase Revelation Aroma that thiols are a big part of what this focus is on, that release of hop characteristics.
Yeah, so thiols or any of these kind of aroma compounds, there's a whole list of them in the hops. Is that the thiol kind of flavor is something sweet or fruity, and every hop has a little different expression of that, right? Why we buy different hops, even if our previous brewosophy experiments show that some people cannot tell the difference between two hops, those hops do have unique signatures, and you want to try to express more of them. Now, it's not a guarantee, right? There's no free lunch, so to speak. You don't know what aromas you're going to unbound that were previously bound up in the hop, but that's the point. And thiols, there's one of them. There's the actual enzyme. It's called the brand name. This Rapidase Revelation Aroma. It has a description that it's a microgranulated pectolytic enzyme preparation with 4 essential alpha and beta glycosidase activities. And so, what does that even mean? That's a ton of words, right?
Yeah, I have no idea.
So let's just start there, and I will say, as many people like to say when they try to give legal advice, they're not a lawyer. I'm not. I'm going to give you chemistry advice, but I'm not a chemist.
Yeah.
I'm an engineer, right? So what I focus on is what are you trying to say, right? Look at the words and what are you trying to do, and does it even make kind of sense, high level sense? So enzymes. So first of all, if you're not familiar with enzymes are proteins and they're different folding. And so when you talk about alpha and beta and all these different names, it's like how the protein is folded. And the simple way to think about an enzyme is that it lowers the barrier to entry for a chemical reaction. Chemical reactions are going on all over the time. At any like given at room temperature, things are going different directions. But a lot of the time, chemical reactions are going in both directions. Say something's becoming from A to B, but it's also going at B to A at the same rate. So it's equilibrium, right? It's not proceeding in any one direction. Enzymes help it go all one direction. It removes the barrier to entry for some chemical reaction. So, it's not like if you don't use this enzyme, you get no hop flavor, right? No hop aroma. Clearly, standard brewing techniques that you've been using already provide that aroma. This enzyme kind of helps push a little bit more. And this glycosidases are found in yeast.
Yeah, right.
Different yeast strains already have these things. It's in the, I would call it the factory, right? The cell factory itself, right? It's already making that and using it there. Pectolytic means it's going to operate on pectin, and that pectin is plant matter, right? So it's locked up in this plant matter, and then we're going to break up the plant matter and hopefully release these things. And why you want multiple different enzymes in the same preparation is you're not sure which enzyme is going to do what to which compounds, right? So you want a broad spectrum of them, and that's what's hopefully going to break down and make more hop aroma in these beers.
That is, it's so deep about stuff that I don't know. Like you, I am definitely not a chemist. My day job is working with the mind of people and their behavior. But to hear that there are these chemicals out there, and there are people who have discovered them, that blows my mind in and of itself.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that can potentially, we have to say potentially at this point, because I actually don't know anybody other than Brian, who completed this experiment we're going to talk about in a bit, who has used this stuff for brewing. But it does get talked about quite a bit, I think, thanks to Scott Janish's book.
Yes.
People have been asking more questions and seeking out how to source this stuff, because we really do want, the big thing in IPA these days, I've mentioned it before, back when I started brewing, probably the same for you, Andy. IPA was about bitterness. It was like, who can drink the most bitter beer, right? It was like this competition. That is obviously not the case these days. We're looking for juicy, fruity, as much of that kind of juice laden characteristic in an IPA, whether hazy or not these days. That's what you're looking for. And now you've got this chemical that you add very small amounts to a beer, and it's purported to increase that potential, and I just think that's amazing. Now, I don't think we can talk about enzymes. I mentioned it earlier. We can't really talk about enzymes and hops without talking about thiols, which we did recently discuss in episode 225. So in an attempt not to be too redundant, we'll just try to do a quick overview, but let's focus a little bit on thiols and how, Rapidase Revelation Aroma, RRA, just so we don't have to keep saying that over and over, how they work in concert with each other.
Yeah. So in this enzyme, right, you're trying to, again, encourage certain chemical reactions to occur. They might be happening naturally, like at some rate. The hope is to rapidly hence the name, rapidly increase that rate during the process of making the beer. So what is a glycoside? It's a flavorless compound found in plants and fruits, and it's usually two things tied together. There's a sugar molecule that's like the plant itself. It could be a carbohydrate or something like that. And then inside there, sugar molecule is another flavor active compound. So it's two things bound together that get broken apart. And so those glycosides, there's the plant matter, which is something we really care about. It's not really fermentable necessarily, though. Some people do argue hop creep is related to these plant matters being added to beer. Of course, different subject. But this flavor active compound, thiol, terpene, whatever, what have you, that's when you get released. It's already, like I said, it's already kind of happening with the yeast itself, but you weren't trying to encourage it. So these thiols enter the beer and then just add to that fruity hop aroma. There's tons of different ones, and they all depend on which kind of hop you're using, of course. And then on top of that, what yeast you're using, because sometimes the thiols will get edited by the yeast or enhanced or suppressed by the yeast, because the yeast is making its own flavors too, because aroma is a crazy spectrum of things, right? It's not just one compound. It's multiple compounds, and it's how it hits your palate.
I was having a conversation with somebody real recently about the impact. It actually started with a chat about these thiol releasing yeasts. So like Cosmic Punch, right?
Yes.
I think Omega does their Cosmic Punch. And we were talking about how, what actually is happening and what's going on. And this person had some background in microbiology, and they were saying, they made a comment to me that I thought, man, that is really eye-opening. I don't know how accurate it is, but the way of thinking about the fact that when we look at yeast, I mean, for me at least, up until maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I viewed these different yeast strains. So, for example, one of my favorite English strains is AO9 Pub, Imperial Yeast AO9 Pub. It's the Fuller strain. I absolutely love it. And I viewed it as that yeast just produces these, esters that are expected in a beer like this, and that's what it does on its own. And then, Chico or AO7 Flagship, that is just a clean yeast because it doesn't produce those esters. It doesn't do these other things. Again, I'm an idiot. I admit that.
Yeah.
Well, the comment that this person made to me was, you got to think of yeast as being far more interactive than that. So when you take AO9 Pub, you're typically tossing that into a wort that has, maybe Maris Otter or some Golden Promise. It has a little bit of crystal malt. You're using, traditional English fuggles, or English hops, I should say, whether that's fuggles or EKG or whatever it may be. And that yeast, the characteristics it produces in many ways is a function of the other stuff that is in that beer. And to me, I'm going, okay, that makes way more sense. And it makes me feel like way more of an idiot for not thinking of it that way. So when it comes to this whole talk about thiols and the enzymes that are kind of required to release bound thiols and whatnot, it makes sense to me that there would be certain chemicals like Rapidase Revelation Aroma that, even though that's not endogenous to certain yeast, there are enzymes that basically the RRA is intended to replicate or emulate in some way, right? And that interaction is what ultimately produces the expected outcome or the desired outcome. So, for example, you've got we know very well at this point that Cascade hops, when used in the absence of a yeast that has these, I guess, enzymes or whatever it is that releases those bound thiols, that you can expect grapefruit and pine. Everybody knows that very well. However, purportedly, in the presence of a yeast like Cosmic Punch that is capable of producing these enzymes that free those bound thiols, you can get a menagerie of different fruity characteristics that you wouldn't necessarily expect from a hop like Cascade. Where, on the other hand, you toss in Citra, and my understanding is, at least what I've been told, is that has just far more free thiols, and that's why you get those fruity, passion fruit type of characteristics directly from that hop, regardless of what is used with it. How far off am I on all of that?
I think you're spot on. It's just, we've bred hops a certain way, right? So we didn't have all the knowledge about chemical analysis of these hops and how yeast are breaking them down, right? As let's just say, for the sake of argument, every year, so many hops are released commercially and so many yeast strains are released commercially, and the direction has been for more flavor, more aroma. And if you think about Citra and all those things, specifically Citra, is just incredibly punchy, right? It was a kind of to me, it was kind of the first set after like Simcoe and Amarillo came out that like Citra, okay, now we have a plan in place, and then Mosaic came out. Now we have Sabro and all these specific hops that have a lot of flavor without really needing anything, right? If you think about specifically clean versus aromatic yeast strains, they didn't have nearly as the impact, right? You can use Citra in a lot of things, right, and get Citra flavor and Citra aroma. You didn't need a certain yeast to do that. Now you have all these new yeast strains that can do even more, and now we're re-examining Cascade, Centennial, right, to see what's in them, because maybe the chemical, just the makeup, the bill of goods that's inside of them is like, okay, we have a lot of potential to release more and more flavor in them. So no, it's correct. It's just you don't need like I said, you don't need special techniques to get Citra to work well, but maybe you can make Citra work even better with some of these other compounds.
It's crazy to me. You use the word potential. The potential Pandora's box, if you will, of hop characteristics that we could, again, potentially get from hops that we thought we knew, perfectly well, just by adding a drop or two of some interesting chemical from a lab. I just think that is absolutely exciting, and to think that you might, and who knows what hops, there's a lot of research going into what hops, the bound thiols and different hops, classic noble hop strains, you've got your classic American hops like Cascade, who knows, Cluster maybe, and just by unlocking, these bound thiols, who knows what types of crazy delicious, flavors we can get in beer in the future. The idea of that is almost hard for me to wrap my head around.
It's this is important time any time's an important time in beer, but specifically in the last 5 or so years, the focus on hops, because it's becoming it's a differentiator, right? I don't know how long ago it was when we just worried about only bitterness, but if you think about the amount of money being put into hops today versus say 20 years ago, right? How much more business there is. Of course, people are going to be analyzing it more. To me, two most important things people are doing with hops right now is biotransformation, which is what we're talking about here, and also hop creep, preventing hops from creating a problem in your beer because of more enzymes. Again, back to enzymes being in the beer and creating wreaking havoc on your dry hop, right? So we're just focused more and more on it because there's so much more money. It's kind of just a capitalist business part of the beer aspect, but there's just so much more people focused on what is going on in hops. So it's very fascinating.
Yeah. And I mean, we're talking about, Rapidase Revelation Aroma specifically in this episode, but the behind the scenes stuff that we kind of get a peek at, the amount of hop products that are being worked on right now as we speak is just mind blowing. And the stuff that's coming out, I just got an email from Haas, a wonderful sponsor of Brewlosophy. They're working on a new flowable product that's intended for the kettle. So you don't have any, they've got other flowable products that you use for bittering or that you use for dry hopping. And now they've got this stuff. I believe they're going to call it kettle ready or something. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I mean, can you imagine 5 years down the road, brewers are going to be able to make delicious, incredible, hop aromatic beers without using any actual, vegetative matter at all.
Yeah.
They're just going to be adding the good stuff. And this stuff is pure. This stuff is not, it's not like they're adding weird crap to the hops. No, they're giving you just the purest form of the stuff that we want in our beer anyways, without any of the stuff you don't want in there. So it's just crazy. The progress that's being made right now in the understanding of hops, and thiols is one of those things. And I think something like RRA, this product from Scott Lab is again, there's a lot of potential there. Again, we have to say, I don't know about you, Andy. I've never used this stuff. Have you ever used it personally?
No, I've not used it. I've heard of it. It's become available. I think one thing with home brewers is we hear about stuff and then we realize you have to buy a kilogram of it. And like, I'm not going to buy that.
And that would last you your entire life.
Yeah, your life. Yeah,
exactly.
So it's a little tougher. I think Marshall and I and other people in Brewlosophy have closer connections to professional brewers, so we can sometimes get these things ahead of a smaller release. And, especially our sponsors can help us out a little bit here and there with getting some smaller amounts of things.
Yeah.
So it's not always as available to the home brewer, but you never know if it, especially for us, we're kind of testing things out and seeing what numbers, of course it's only one experiment, but that it could encourage you to examine it and say, hey, look, looking at the results of this, what about this? What about that? And then re-examining things. It's just kind of our first take in these new chemical compounds, which I'm thrilled for because I just love playing with this stuff. I think some people get a little nervous when it's like, it's not grains and it's not hops, right? It's not the real thing, right? But if you think about those products that I even mentioned, it's actually probably all upside for you because you're going to spend maybe a little bit more money because obviously it took more processing. But then if you could guarantee yourself a much better product at the end of the day because they've actually done the analysis, like think about Lupomax or something like that, where it's actually engineered to be consistent year in and year out. That's, I think, really important.
And I mean, you think about, that's what I was thinking of too. Lupomax was like a first line product, right? That you've still got vegetal matter with Lupomax. You just have much less of it and much more of the stuff you actually want. And I've yet to hear from a single person who hasn't absolutely loved their experience with Lupomax. In fact, Brad at Crow and Wolf has integrated it into so many of his hoppy beers because he loves that pungent hop characteristic you get from it. And again, you use something like Rapidase Revelation Aroma to release those characteristics with just a few drops of an enzyme. It's an enzyme. I'm pro science. I'm pro GMO. I've never had an issue with that. This is just another cool tool that you can add to the brewer's bag, assuming it does what it's intended to do. Now, again, you and I have never brewed with it, so we're kind of speaking blindly here, just based on our research of this product and what Brian explained to us. So when it comes to using Rapidase Revelation Aroma, basically I believe what you want to do is try to focus when you're brewing a beer, designing your recipe. You want to try to focus on using hops that are known to have higher levels of bound thiols, because if you're trying to free thiols, with this product, and you're using hops that are known to have more of those free thiols, you're not really doing much, right? That's my understanding, is those enzymes are already at work. They don't need to be there because those thiols are already there. So you want to focus more on hops like Cascade or Calypso or Sots, which are known to have higher content of bound thiols.
Yeah, and so you have to set up the shop right. You have to have the right precursors put in place before you're going to do it. Now, thiols, we talk a lot about thiols, but there's other flavor compounds too. So one thing we've been noticing is, if you like hops, like these fruitier flavors, that's very in vogue right now. There's specific kind of fruity flavors you're getting, right? So, but there's other things you could find out. But we do know from chemical analysis, Cascade, Calypso, Sots have these things, and there's actually been multiple professional breweries that have played around with either this Rapidase or other bioavailable yeast, right? Yeast that actually should, purportedly do some type of biotransformation of the bound thiols into more free thiols. So you got to start there at least, but experimentation is the king here, and that's what you need to try and see how far you get. Yeah,
and so when it comes to actually using this stuff, you've got your beer made. Typically what I read online is that people are either adding a very small dose. In fact, it's 0.5 grams, which is 0.018 ounces per 5 gallons of wort of beer. That is not much at all. I mean, again, you buy a kilo of this stuff, you're gonna be handing it down to your children.
Exactly.
When you're long gone. So the perfect opportunity for a club buy or something like that, or to hook up with a professional brewer and see, see if you can't buy some off them. But you're not adding much at all, and typically you're tossing it in at the start of fermentation or when you're adding your dry hops. Again, the idea being that you want to release those bound thiols, so it doesn't need to be boiled. It doesn't need to be treated in any other way. You just want it to be present when those hops are present. And so by adding it at the start of fermentation, my understanding is that you're working on those kettle hop additions. And I don't know if there would be any, remnant available by the time you do add your dry hops. And I'm sure there are people out there who've messed around with this who are adding that dose at both start of fermentation and dry hop. I'm not sure it's going to hurt you or anything. Again, you're looking at maybe 1 gram total for a 5 gallon batch.
Yeah, and enzymes, they're protein-based, right? So if you think about, if you make your eggs in the morning, if you heat them up too much, they will denature. And you can't heat them up, right? This is not a kettle edition. This is you could go in the mash too. You do mash hopping and you add it in the mash or something like that. I don't know that, though that is a temperature, it might be beyond that. You have to look at the product and see how hot it can go. But there's an opportunities there. Boiling it for sure will denature it. But that's why you're doing it cold side. It is a question, it's... these things, and we'll get into it in the experiment around what is happening or not happening. But it is always a question about what is actually present when you add something, right? Especially when you do a mash, you're focusing on certain enzymes. It doesn't mean the enzymes aren't there, right? It means that you're focused on the chemical reactivity of a certain enzyme is higher at certain temperatures, right? So it could matter what temperature you do this at. The problem is, the temperature it's where it's more useful is going to do negative things to the beer. So
Right.
it's an open question.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I've had no real experience with Rapidase Revelation Aroma. Andy, I know you haven't either, but Brewlosophy's Brian Hall was able to get his hands on some after reading the new IPA by Scott Janish, and he designed an experiment to test it out. We're going to be getting into those results when we're back from this break. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com. And be sure to let them know Brewlosophy sent you. Craftmaster Growlers takes traveling with and sharing beer to a new level. Made from heavy-duty stainless steel, Craftmaster Growlers are double-wall insulated and can keep beer cold for up to 8 hours. Unlike typical growlers, Craftmaster Growlers come with a swiveling tap and fully integrated CO2 regulator cap, allowing beer to stay fresh for 2 weeks or more. The square design takes up less space and will fit in most refrigerator doors, and every Craftmaster Growler comes with a 1-year warranty. There are 64 and 128-ounce versions available over at craftmastergrowlers.com. Like I said before, when I'm drinking a hopped up IPA, I really love when I can smell it from a distance, and I'm the type of brewer who's willing to step outside of the confines of the Reinheitsgebot if it results in better beer. So for me, if adding a tiny amount of Rapidase Revelation Aroma really does increase overall hop character, I am all for it. That's what we aim to test out in an experiment completed by past contributor Brian Hall.
So we start with a single 10-gallon batch of West Coast IPA. His grain bill for this one was 63% pale malt, 17% malted oats, 11% Mecca grade estate Miletus malt.
Metolius malt. That's actually like an old. This is a total aside, but so Seth Klon from Mecca grade estate malt. All of his malts have really unique names that are named after these small towns near where their farm is at, and Metolius is one of those. And Venora is their Vienna style malt as well. You've got anyways, Pelton and Lamanta, all of that stuff. So it's Metolius, but yeah, he used 11% of that in this beer.
It's a Munich style malt, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's 9% Vienna malt. So brewing process, he mashed at 152 Fahrenheit or 67 degrees Celsius for 60 minutes. When the mash was complete, he sparged and boiled for 60 minutes. The hopping for this one, critical for this specific experiment, 12 grams of Magnum at 60, 20 grams each Cascade, Eldorado, and Medusa at 20, 29 grams each Cascade, Eldorado, and Medusa at 5, and 29 grams each Cascade and Medusa, plus 20 grams of Eldorado at 1 minute.
So let's talk about this for a minute. He used the Cascade, and I think the goal there was, again, to free those bound thiols. I've used Eldorado and Medusa in my brewing a number of times. Obviously, I think most people have experienced with Magnum as a bittering hop. I'm like, again, speculating. You and me, Andy, as experienced brewers who have used all of these hops many times. What might we expect from this hop schedule? This list of hops in an IPA with Rapidase Revelation Aroma versus without.
So I think the baseline here is making a West Coast IPA is focusing on that fruitiness. Now, the kind of concept of those fruities has changed over time, but the hope being the Cascade is, to me, is like that grapefruit. Eldorado is a little more Jolly Rancher candy. Yep. And I'm not as familiar with Medusa as much, but and maybe you can comment. But those things will have this kind of general fruitiness thing. Now, I think I find with adding something like to focus on thiol specifically, it becomes like where the product is from the wine industry, this white rind, this grapey, fruity, gooseberry kind of aroma and flavor comes out of the beer more, or theoretically speaking, maybe that's also a little psychosomatic, but when I've had these beers, they tend to have a more of a wine character to them than not, and that's what I would hope to come out of from that Cascade. So to edit the Cascade slightly, so almost like the Cascade starts to contribute characteristics more associated with New World hops, like let's say Nelson Sauvin, right? Exactly. So my expectation in a beer like this, my experience with Medusa, which I'm
almost certain, I guess I could Google it, is a Neomex hop, right? Or at least a Neomex hybrid. So it has this ability to kind of impart what I call earthy fruitiness with a hint of like a coconut and oak in the background. Now he's not using crazy amounts in this beer. This is not a Medusa centric beer. I think he's using it more as like a mid palate, to give you that fullness, which I think it works really well for. El Dorado, just like you said, is like lemon. It's like a lemon Jolly Rancher, that really nice, bright lemon candy type of character. Not the oxidation sweetness that I get, but like that characteristic that you actually want. That I think actually balances out the more free fruity characteristics that you can get in some beers. Now, without Rapidase Revelation Aroma, I would expect that Cascade to contribute a what I call a classic Pacific Northwest piney, slight grapefruit rind characteristic. With it, I would expect it to open up, like you said, the more new world type fruity characteristics that we expect from, say, Mutter, or I think I'm saying that right, or Nelson Sauvin, which is more of that gooseberry white wine brightness that you get, which again, paired with these hops can be, it seems to me like it would be a really delightful drinking experience that's maybe a bit more unique than what you'd get in most common hazies or West Coast IPAs.
I think you were looking for Motueka on that one.
Well, there's Motueka, and then there's one called Moutere that I just had a single hop example of that is real. I think it's Mutter or Muteri, but it's really nice. It's got a really nice kind of fresh fruit characteristics that's unique and not all too uncommon, but just kind of unique in and of itself. But yeah, I think with that Cascade having the bound thiols freed, I would just expect it to kind of boost up that fruity impression a bit.
Well, the one thing is that you're hoping when we do these experiments, you're trying to do something where you're seeing, what significant impact, right? If we had used all the new school hops and try to use thiols, it might be very hard because you're just increasing them, right? And your flavor, like hearing, like a lot of things, there's limits to it, right? You get saturated. We're trying to see a difference in actually these things that would not have maybe as much of a aroma in that genre, right? We're trying to see if there are differences, right? So it'd be interesting, you run an experiment where these hops, these thiols already exist. You add the Rapidase. Is it more? What is more, right? What is the definition? What's the units of that? You don't know. So this is why this hop bill, I think, really makes a good sense for this experiment.
Yeah, at least the initial iteration, for sure.
Exactly. So he brewed the beer. So the boil was complete, wort was chilled, and the refractometer reading confirmed a target OG of 1064. So this is a 10-gallon batch, remember, so we're going to split them in half for the experiment. So he split the wort evenly between two fermenters, so pitched a single pouch of Imperial yeast A31 tartan into each one.
Now, A31 tartan, just to clarify, that is the Edinburgh strain. I believe it's from McEwen's, and it's known. People really enjoy that in hoppier beers. I'm not a huge fan of it in IPA. At least the two times that I've used it on my own for IPA, I do tend to like it in more English Scottish style ales. But Brian likes it in these styles, and that's why I chose it. Now, the reason I talk about it is because I'm not sure if this is one of those yeasts or strains that are known for having this ability to free bound thiols or anything. I really don't know, but
yeah. So the beers were left to ferment at 66 Fahrenheit or 19 Celsius for 4 days, at which point it became time to dry hop. The dry hop was 67 grams of Medusa, 48 grams of Cascade, and 37 grams of Citra.
Yeah, so let's talk about this again. So his biggest dose on the dry hop is Medusa, which anyone who's used Medusa, I've had a single hop beer with it, and it's a unique one. Like most of the Neomex hops are. The second most is the Cascade, which is good. That's what we're looking at. And then he's using Citra, which is known, I believe, to have more free thiols. That's why you get that kind of fruit punch, passion fruit thing from it. So, what might we expect here is any contribution of that Cascade in the dry hop. For the non-RRA beer, I would expect it to kind of present itself how I expect, which is pine and grapefruit. The one with the Rapidase Revelation Aroma, I would expect to have more of that fresh fruity characteristic as well. Might the Citra and Medusa characteristics cover that up? I think it's a valid argument. Sure.
I think that's one thing. That's the gets into the whole sensory analysis aspect, like I mentioned, right? It's what you can smell versus that versus, if it's not there versus it's there, that's one thing. But then it's like, what's the volume knob set at, right? And then where that's something you have to examine and think about, especially when you design something like this.
Well, yeah, and to be fair, when Brian completed this experiment, I mean, it was really soon after we started hearing about this RRA product from Scott and his book and all of that, and there wasn't as much talk about what exactly hops you're supposed to use. It was just, hey, add this stuff to get more hop character in your beer, and so he kind of went with the whole real world test. What happens if I design a beer, like this, and I add this stuff? Is it going to be hoppier? That's all we're looking for, right? So
exactly. So at that time, he added 0.5 grams or 0.018 ounces of RRA along with the dry hop. So he did it at dry hopping.
Yeah, exactly. So he added this one at the dry hop, not at yeast pitch, which is that's probably the route I've seen most referenced online. So that's what I would stick with as well.
Cool. So then he dry hopped for 6 more days. Hydrometer measurements were taken to show both finished at 10:10. So any type of re-fermentation that occurred without dry hopping was over with, and that both beers ended up the same place.
Yep.
And maybe more importantly, I would not have expected this change between RRA having any type of impact on OG, but it did not have an impact on OG.
Well, and with all the talk about hop creep and the impact that certain enzymatic reactions can have on re-fermentation or further fermentation of hop sugars and all of that, I think it's interesting, at the very least, an interesting observation that adding Rapidase Revelation Aroma as prescribed, right, as recommended at 0.5 grams for a 5-gallon batch, that didn't seem to have any effect on overall attenuation of that beer. And so already we're looking and saying, okay, nothing changed so far because of that small amount of RRA that was added.
So at this point, he pressure transferred into CO2 purged kegs, placed in gas in a keezer, and allowed to condition for about a week before they were ready to serve to our participants.
Okay, yeah, and here's the fun part. He did collect actual data. I believe this might have been completed pre-COVID, so we're getting back on a fairly old experiment here.
Yeah.
Before we talk about the participant data, the blind participant data, let's talk a little bit about Brian's experience and as well as what the beers look like. Now, I had no preconceived notions of what to expect from a beer, particularly in the way that looked or the impact that it might have on foam formation. I wouldn't have expected them to look much different. And to my eyes, the beers in the picture that I'm looking at right now, they look identical to me.
Yeah, and I would not expect any type of color or appearance impact whatsoever. I mean, it's possible that some of these glycosidases that are in hops create some type of haze that maybe you've eaten up.
Sure.
But I think that's very, in the noise, especially for home brewing. I think you need some professional equipment. It's just a potential thing I could imagine, but not seen here given the nature of the experiment. Yeah.
Now, mind you, Brian Hall is one of the few people who I credit as being a big part of the push to make hazy IPA acceptable to the masses. He prior to him joining the Brewlosophy crew, he was doing his own blog. I'm not even going to try to Browery Shagok or something like that. But it was one of my favorites, and that's how he and I got connected, and he eventually ended up joining the crew for a bit. But he was a big part. Him and Ed Coffey and Scott Janish and Michael Tonsmeyer were really the four kind of people who I thought were really pushing this idea, and all of them, as expected, were from the East. Eastern part of the U.S., and they were really pushing this concept of, hey, the haze isn't bad, But the reason I say that is he has a very astute, in my opinion, a very astute ability to smell and taste different hop characteristics in beer. He's brewed, probably more IPA than anybody I know. And on the homebrew scale, it's like, was his main focused from, West Coast clear IPA all the way to the East Coast, hazy stuff. The fact that he was unable to consistently identify the unique sample in his own semi-blind triangle test, to me, I know that we are not an outfit who says just because one person did it means that that's the fact. But the fact that Brian, a person whose palate and whose nose I trust far more than my own, was unable to tell a difference, already started sending me that vibe of, oh boy, did this stuff really have much of an impact at all,
Yeah. And it's important because I would say credit to whoever's focused on, like, I've I think I feel very confident when I drink a hobby beer. I have my own
Yeah.
personal opinion about it. I think everyone does when you're for certain styles of beer that you're focused on. But I'm not going to say I'm the expert. I'm not I'm not objective. I'm not a gas chromatograph, right? I know what I like, and I can't always tell that. And most people can't, right? That's not the point. Is that it's what you get out of it that matters, not what what someone else tells you they get out of it, right? Because you're not drinking for them and they're not drinking for you. But I appreciate that Brian, coming from where Brian's coming from, it's an important data point, put it that way.
Yeah, and that is exactly why we do the type of data collection that we do, is that, hey, you got this one guy, there's a million homebrewers out there who can start a blog and give you their opinion as fact. We don't want to do that. We want to break away from that, as much as we love reading those blogs, actually. But our thing is we want to see what a panel of tasters who have no idea what we did to this beer, if they're able to detect a difference. And there are times where the brewer, is unable to, perhaps due to a lack of sensitivity to certain differences, whereas the tasting panel is able to taste a difference. And then there's also the opposite, where we're able to taste a difference occasionally. This is very rare. And the tasting panel is unable to. Yeah. Well, in this case, Brian served this beer to 21 participants, again, completely blind to the variable being tested. They probably didn't even know what Rapidase Revelation Aroma was.
Yeah.
But they had no idea what it was. They just got their triangle test, two of the same exact beer one exact same beer in two of the glasses, and then one glass was the other beer. Out of those 21, 12 of the participants would have had to identify the unique sample in order for us to say that there was some, with confidence that, it seems this Rapidase Revelation Aroma had some sort of a qualitative impact on this beer. In the end, how many people actually, of those 21, actually was able to identify the unique sample?
Brian ended up with 7 people, or 33%, which would be not significant by our standards.
Not only not significant, that is exactly what you would expect if people were randomly guessing, right? You've got 3 cups, so you'd expect random guessing to be 1/3, spread out over those 3 for each one. And that's exactly what it was. Exactly 1/3 of 21 tasters, 7 people chose and we can say on this one with confidence, happened to guess the beer that was the unique sample, which really does indicate that there just wasn't much of a difference at all, perceptibly at least, between these beers.
And something we just want to go back to and say, because Marshall kind of touched on it, is like, it's not to say that those 7 people were guessing, though we do collect data that sometimes people say, yeah, I guessed.
Yeah.
However, there could be people that are like, dude, get dead to rights. I know the difference between these 2 beers.
Sure.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
It's just, we want to look at the broader statistics. I come back to a very specific case when I started homebrewing. I was convinced. Did I convince myself, or could I do it? I was convinced certain yeast strains were producing phenols when no one else could smell them. That's my experience, right?
Yeah.
You can't tell me I didn't. It would have been great to have done a real blind triangle of some of this stuff back in the day. Really test myself, right? But I was convinced. So it's important that when we say random, it's just the statistics and not the not saying that someone's just guessing, but just bring that up.
What we're doing is trying to generalize. I mean, that's the whole point of doing these types of tests. And when it comes to sensory analysis, there's no way for us to say that somebody did or did not perceive a difference.
Exactly.
There is a lot of good evidence to show how bias and how the mind works when it comes to perceiving these. In fact, we just published a really interesting experiment. I thought it was the one that you helped out with, Andy, a couple weeks ago. That was like, so interesting about how being told you're correct influences your level of confidence, right? In your original selection. So we cannot say, because of this result, obviously, we need to get this out there. We are not saying that Rapidase Revelation Aroma is hokey and doesn't work. In the slightest, that's not what we're saying. What we're determining is, based on this particular case and Brian's beer and the recipe that he designed, the very specific things that he did to this beer, that the Rapidase Revelation Aroma did not seem to increase hop character in the beer that he added it to. The beers were, again, from a general statistics perspective, perceptibly identical. They were qualitatively indifferent, as it were. There's a possibility that the A31 tartan yeast produces that beta lyase that's required, right, to release those bound thiols, and that so maybe that did the trick. Who knows? There's a multitude of factors that could have played into this. Does that render Rapidase Revelation moot? I don't think so.
So to me, and how I look at this result is, I think there's a lot more exploration to do it, right? So first, you have it coming from the wine industry. There's numbers of percentages, milligrams per liter of these compounds, right? It could be totally different, right? The availability and the how the glycosidases are found in wine could be totally different from hops, right? It was a choice to try to use this. So I would imagine the people making the chemical found some statistical significance to then invest money to create this product and sell it, right? So let's just assume the wine side has got it and we're using it for hops. So maybe there's some similarities, but it's not the same chemically. The second thing I'll say is, or at least my thought process on this is, if you think about enzymes, so very common in people doing very light lagers or something where they're doing these very low temperature mashes to get very, very fermentable wort, is you add enzymes. These enzymes work because they're just in packages and they're added and they're available. Now, it could be that this glycosidases that we're adding, these not artificial glycosidases, these are naturally forming ones, but they're just not in the right place. And I kind of come to this concept of bioavailability. If the glycosidase is not in a cell wall, inside the factory, so to speak, of the yeast, it might just be worthless, right? It might just be sitting around and not actually doing anything because it's not inside yeast. Yeast has a specific pH. There's hydrostatic pressure. There's all these things going around that it's in the right place at the right time. The other possibility is we need to use more of it, right? We're using so little. What would doubling do, right? What would tripling it do? And then go from there, right? Maybe we're just not getting enough. And the last one I would say is maybe these hops just didn't have enough precursors in the thiols to generate it. So there's a lot of options here. I think this is just the first test of this new chemistry to be tried out on hops.
Absolutely. And I appreciate when we approach a new experiment with a new idea, a new variable, a new product like Rapidase Revelation Aroma, from the perspective of, okay, let's just design a beer that I would normally design on my own, add this product that's purported to, increase hop aroma in this case, and see what happens. And to me, that's a good place to start, because what if it had, what if that RRA beer had just been more fragrant? And that would be amazing. Okay, we've determined that with this style of beer, with this hopping regimen, it just didn't seem to have much of an impact. So let's go back and see if we can't reduce things down a little bit, right? And I think it would be really neat to repeat this experiment. We'd have to get our hands on some Rapidase Revelation Aroma, but to repeat it with an IPA that is hopped entirely with, say, Cascade hops or even Sots hops or something like that. How nuts would that be to make a beer, an IPA with all Sots hops that is, a fruit bomb? That would be crazy, So,
and I think, especially in my anecdotal experience with the yeast strains that have been what they call thiolized, they've been some type of genetic manipulation, either a actual editing of the yeast strain using CRISPR techniques, or with different blending techniques using plasmids and editing yeast strains that way. My, again, subjective single point experience was that there was an increase in the hop aroma, hop flavor, and it did have this kind of unique character, though it was subtle, and I didn't like it as much as the natural hop flavor.
Weird? Yeah.
So it isn't a one size fits all thing, right? It's not going to be like, and I think I played around this game. I played this game basically. I had a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale clone, something like a recipe obviously uses Cascade, and I just used Cosmic Punch. I thought it was a bit more, but I couldn't claim that it was so much hoppier or something like that, right? It was just a slight difference, right? And it wasn't a blind triangle, so it was totally subjective.
Yeah, well, we do have some reader comments on this one. It yielded quite a few comments. I think people were just trying to figure out, like, okay, what's going on here? The first one comes from Will Allwart. He says, another point to consider is maybe the beer was already saturated with hop aroma. With the kettle additions and dry hop, it would probably be worth repeating this experiment with a style that with less hops added, maybe a blonde ale. Either way, very interesting article. Also, I highly recommend Scott Janish's book to anyone interested in hops at all. I mean, of course, fantastic information throughout. Will says, yeah, we don't get paid for you buying Scott's book. We all absolutely love it. The work that he put in to the new IPA is just phenomenal. It's easy to read. It's interesting. You learn new stuff. Go pick up the new IPA and enjoy that book.
It's well cited. You can go find those papers. You could always find an academic paper online. They exist behind paywalls and not so walled paywalls. But it was good with it, especially that just to not to toot his horn too hard. But it's a very difficult topic. You look at these papers and it's just words upon words and words. I mean, I went to graduate school. I hate reading these papers. There's so many words, right? Cade's in the thick of it right now, working on this stuff, and I mean, it's just so much to process. And I think Scott did a great job summarizing things and saying, no, read these papers, don't read these papers.
Yep.
And here's some data to back up what we've been finding. So
yeah, I truly believe that the ability to distill information into consumable portions is like a personality quirk, and Scott has it it's just amazing the way he put that. We sound like we're just kissing his butt here. Scott, we love you. You know that already, but go get his book. It's amazing. And Will, I agree with you. Actually, I commented earlier that I think a 100% Cascade hopped IPA would be neat to see, but I like your thinking here as well, that maybe go with a less hopped beer like a blonde ale, or maybe even a Pilsner or something with Sots again, and add just a little bit of that RRA and see what happens. If it's more fruity, then we can say with a little bit more confidence that it does seem to have this this ability to kind of release those bound thiols. I think it'd be really interesting. Next comment comes from Aaron Branchard, who says, I'd be interested in seeing how this affects late kettle whirlpool additions more than dry hops. One thing I've heard over the years is that hop aroma compounds form glycosides when heated. My thought is that this product could potentially free up aroma compounds that are, quote, locked up into glycosides in the boil or at hot whirlpool temperatures.
Yeah, I mean, those are kind of how you have to process those things. Like I said earlier, enzymes have definitely temperature ranges, and I'm not sure of the temperature ranges for this specific enzyme. So it may be that when you make those glycosides and you're trying to add at those times, that's the problem. So, I've heard and remember people in some of the blogs or some of the forums mentioning like doing mash hopping, because that's another place where maybe you're releasing some of them. So, if he had used this at dry hop and it was with dry hopping, but if say you had done it, maybe another way to approach this experiment, theoretically speaking, is to focus on dry hopping and using the Rapidase aroma in both, and then saying, oh, okay, I did a dry hop and I saw noticing it versus not, right? And so it's, this is one experiment. This kind of doesn't lead you to that path of thinking that way, but just think about to tease out where are these hops being added and how am I impacting them the most when both beers use the Rapidase enzyme. Yeah, no, I agree, Eric. That'd be a really interesting something to look at as well, right? Is how the impact of Rapidase Revelation Aroma when added to the kettle or at Whirlpool. Kind of a little bit of an aside. There are a lot of companies out there right now that are messing around with enzymes to use at different points in the brewing process. You got AEB, Scott Lab, who does Rapidase Revelation Aroma. I know Novozymes is working on stuff, and it's interesting to look at because there are enzymes that you can add at pretty much any point during the brewing process that are purported to do different things. And I think it's really interesting to see, to kind of be around during this time where we get to watch as it happens, right? This development, the progress in brewing and the weird stuff that we're up to. We are far past at this point, and we will be even further past it in the future. The whole, 4 ingredients and that's all. I think we're going to see some really neat stuff coming up in the near future that could potentially help to kind of pull us out of this stagnancy that we're in with craft beer and brewing right now. And I'm not saying that to diss on it. The COVID thing kind of brought us down a little bit, and we're doing a good job getting out of it. This is the kind of stuff I think has the ability to kind of light the flame under the rockets, as it were. And I think it's interesting. I know there are going to be people out there who are anti-add anything, but water, hops, grain, and yeast. That's okay. The fact that we all can do that just as easily as we can drop a couple, drops of enzyme into a wort or whatever, I think is neat. And there's room for all of this, in my opinion. It is rich to me when someone says only use these ingredients, but then a commercial brewer will add tons of additives for clarification, packaging stability and stuff like that. But it's like, oh, beer is just beer. But honestly, go ask a professional brewer what they're adding to make sure the beer is clear and fit all 50 states and doesn't go rot on the shelf, right? You'll be surprised to hear what they have to do to add some of these things. So
and what cracks me up, Andy, is that now with all of this stuff, it seems like, back in the day, just 10 years ago, if you used flaked maize, if you had corn or rice to your beer, you're just you're blaspheming, and it's a terrible thing. Now people are like, whatever, man, look at all this other crazy stuff people are adding, and I think it's exciting and interesting. Well, that is all we've got on brewing with Rapidase Revelation Aroma. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Andy?
I think this is though not significant. This is only one data set, right?
Yep.
This own data point. I think it's going to find you're going to find it much easier to find the yeast strains that are bio available. You're only going to find more of those. It'll be always tougher, in my opinion, for home brewers to access chemicals like this, chemistry or enzymes like this. So don't be dissuaded. I only see that as an opportunity for these companies to make the smaller packages, even if they're making maybe a break even, or work with people like More Beer or these larger companies that can repackage it for them into a economical product, so there is a profit being made. But don't be dissuaded. There's a lot of things to work on here, and there could be a hop coming out where it's all bound thiols, and then we find out we just get amazing flavor from because of these chemicals. So just stay tuned.
Yep, couldn't agree more, man. Well, don't forget to subscribe to the Brew Lab, where host Cade Job takes you into the lab with real brewing experts to discuss the fascinating work they've done. And as always, you can read more about the experiment we discussed by clicking the link to the article on brewlosophy.com in the description of this episode. The Brewlosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors, as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brewlosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brewlosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brewlosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey, cause it soothes my throat. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no more.